The alarm hits at 5:45 a.m. It isn't a harsh sound anymore, just a low vibration against the worn wood of the nightstand. Outside, the streetlights are still on, casting a muted yellow glow through the blinds. You don't roll over. You don't check social media. Instead, you slide out of bed, feet hitting the cold floorboards, and walk straight to the kitchen. The apartment is dead quiet. You press the switch on the electric kettle, and while the water heats up, you open the laptop. The screen illuminates your face in the dark room. A single browser tab is open. A dashboard. 3 numbers sit on the screen, quiet, unassuming, but undeniable. $640. That was just from yesterday. It didn't come from your employer. It didn't come from a manager approving your overtime or a quarterly bonus wrapped in a cheap corporate email. It came while you were sitting in a 2-hour budget meeting at your day job, nodding along to slides about quarterly restructuring. You pour the hot water into a mug, sit back down, and watch the cursor blink. 2 years ago, your mornings looked entirely different. Back then, 5:45 a.m. felt like a sentence. You'd lie in bed calculating down to the minute how long you could delay getting up before you'd be late for the commute. You remember the exact feeling in your chest, that subtle, persistent weight. Not full-blown panic, just a dull, grinding anxiety. The kind that comes from knowing your entire life rests on a single point of failure. A bi-weekly direct deposit. If that deposit stopped, the whole structure folded. The rent, the car payment, the groceries, the tiny illusion of stability, all tied to a single desk, a single boss, and a company that wouldn't hesitate to replace your role in 48 hours if the balance sheet required it. You didn't snap in some dramatic cinematic breakdown. Most people don't. It was smaller than that. It was a Tuesday afternoon, standing by the office coffee machine, listening to a coworker who had been at the company for 14 years explain how he was trying to figure out how to afford his kids' dental work. He sounded exhausted, resigned. You looked at him, and for the first time, you didn't see a colleague. You saw your own future, written out 10 years in advance. That night, you went home, cooked a simple dinner, and sat at your desk. You didn't buy a course. You didn't post on LinkedIn about starting a journey. You didn't tell your partner, your friends, or your parents. You made a decision, silently, in the quiet of a Tuesday night. You were going to build something, and you were going to tell absolutely no one. The first 6 months were invisible. That's the part no one prepares you for. When you start building a second income stream in complete secrecy, there is no public validation. No one is double-tapping your photos. No one is saying, "Proud of you," or "Keep grinding." It's just you, a lukewarm cup of coffee, and a glowing screen at 10:30 p.m. while the rest of the building goes to sleep. You chose something quiet, not a noisy business that required setting up a public persona, but a service business back-end. B2B data organization and automated workflow setups for local firms. Something dry, unglamorous, and deeply necessary. Every evening after work, you'd strip off your corporate clothes, throw on an old t-shirt, and spend 3 hours learning. You learned basic scripting. You learned how small logistics companies manage their invoices. You cold-emailed business owners off Google Maps, tweaking your message 50 times until it sounded like a human being offering a clear solution rather than a salesperson looking for a handout. By month 3, you had sent 94 emails. You got 89 silences, 4 outright rejections, and 1 reply. That reply came in on a Thursday at 2:15 p.m. You were sitting in your cubicle at work, listening to your supervisor debate the font size on a promotional flyer. Your phone vibrated in your pocket. You pulled it out under the desk. "Can you talk tomorrow at 9 a.m.? We need this fixed." Your heart hit your ribs. You had to take a personal call during your morning break, pacing back and forth in the cold alleyway behind the office building, talking through shivering breath to a warehouse manager 2 states away. You quoted him $800 for the job. You thought he'd argue. He just said, "Send the invoice. If you fix it by Monday, I'll throw in another $200. When you hung up, You stood in that alley for a long time. The smell of dumpsters and diesel exhaust was thick in the air, but you couldn't feel it. For the first time in your adult life, you had generated money entirely on your own terms. No permission, no performance review. You walked back inside, sat at your desk, and logged into the company portal. You said nothing to the person sitting next to you. You just opened your spreadsheet and marked your first client in green. Maintaining the secret became a discipline of its own. Humans have a natural urge to share when things go well. It's hardwired into us. When you make progress, you want the people around you to see it, to validate it, to celebrate it with you. But you quickly realize that telling people changes the energy of what you're building. If you tell your friends, they ask endless questions out of skepticism or misaligned enthusiasm. Isn't that risky? Are you going to quit your job? My cousin tried something like that and got scammed. If you tell your family, they project their own fears onto you. They want you to be safe. They prefer the predictable misery of a traditional job over the unknown variables of building something yourself. So, you kept your mouth shut. At Friday night dinners with friends, the conversation would inevitably turn to work. Everyone complained. It was a ritual. They complained about their managers, the lack of raises, the rising cost of living, the feeling of being trapped. A year prior, you would have joined right in. You would have had 3 stories ready about corporate incompetence. Now, you just listened. You took a sip of your drink, nodded sympathetically and said, "Yeah, it's tough out there." Underneath the table, your phone would buzz with a notification. A recurring subscription payment from a client. $350, processed automatically. You'd slide the phone back into your pocket and pass the salsa. The contrast created a strange, surreal detachment. You were living 2 parallel lives. In one life, you were the quiet employee who brought a packed lunch, drove a 7-year-old sedan, and never caused a stir. In the other, you were quietly constructing a financial fortress, brick by brick, in the dark. By month 12, the second income matched your day job's monthly salary. That was the month everything shifted psychologically. Up until that point, your day job was your lifeline. If you lost it, you were sinking. But once the side revenues surpassed your living expenses, the dynamic in your office inverted entirely. You noticed it on a Monday morning during a high-stakes team call. The vice president was upset about a missed deadline, raising his voice, throwing around subtle threats about performance metrics and team accountability. Normally, a call like that would have made your stomach knot up. You'd spend the rest of the day walking on eggshells, rereading emails 4 times before sending them, desperate to stay in everyone's good graces. This time, you sat back in your chair. You looked at the speaker icon flashing on the screen. You didn't feel angry. You didn't feel scared. You felt distant. You realized that the authority this person held over your life was an illusion you had voluntarily participated in. They controlled your paycheck, yes, but that paycheck was no longer the thing keeping the lights on. The fear was gone. And without fear, corporate posturing looks remarkably small. You spoke up during the meeting, calmly, directly, offering a practical solution without any of the usual defensive hedging. Your boss looked at you, slightly surprised by your posture. When you aren't desperate to keep a job, you ironically become much better at it. You stop playing politics because you don't need the safety of the herd. You speak clearly. You set boundaries. You leave at 5 p.m. on the dot, not out of rebellion, but because your time between 5:30 p.m. and midnight is worth far more than the unwritten expectation of unpaid overtime. Money accumulates quietly when you don't spend it to impress people. Because no one knew about the second income, there was no pressure to upgrade your life. When people start making more money publicly, they buy the things that broadcast it. A newer car, a bigger apartment, better clothes. They upgrade their lifestyle to match their new status, effectively trapping themselves on a higher tier of the exact same hamster wheel. Because you told no one, your overhead stayed identical. Your friends thought you were making $45,000 a year. In reality, you were taking home nearly $140,000. The excess didn't go to luxury goods. It went into a separate commercial bank account that didn't even have a physical debit card attached to it. Every month, tens of thousands of dollars flowed in, sitting there like silent fuel. You'd look at that balance on Sunday afternoons. It wasn't about buying a sports car or renting a villa. It was about the distance that number created between you and disaster. That money represented options. It represented 6 years of living expenses if you decided to walk away tomorrow. It represented the ability to say no to anything that degraded your self-respect. One evening, your older brother called you. He was stressed out, pacing his kitchen, talking about an unexpected $6,000 repair on his home roof. He was trying to figure out which credit card to put it on, his voice tight with that familiar, suffocating dread. You listened quietly. You didn't preach. You didn't explain your new life. You just said, "Send me the invoice. I've got some savings tucked away. Pay me back whenever, or don't worry about it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "I know things are tight for you right now." "I'm sure," you said. You wired the money 5 minutes later. That was the moment you realized what wealth actually was. It wasn't the clothes or the flex on social media. It was the ability to reach out into someone else's storm and quietly hand them an umbrella without needing them to know how you bought it. 18 months in, the friction began to show. Not in your business, but in your tolerance for the mundane. When you spend 8 hours a day building a system that directly rewards your effort, returning to an environment where effort is rewarded with more administrative work becomes physically taxing. You'd sit in training seminars about corporate synergy, watching people argue over color schemes on PowerPoint presentations, and you could feel the hours of your life ticking away. You weren't angry at the people around you. They were just playing the game they were handed. But you were no longer playing the same game. You started using your lunch hours differently. Instead of eating at your desk or walking to the local deli with the team, you'd walk 3 blocks away to a quiet bench outside an old library. You'd open your laptop, connect to your phone's hotspot, and handle customer requests, review code, or approve invoices. The air was crisp. People walked by, wrapped in their coats, rushing back to their respective offices. You'd sit there in the cold, typing furiously for 45 minutes, then close the laptop, put it back in your bag, walk back to your building, scan your badge, and take the elevator up to the 4th floor. You were a ghost in the machine, a temporary visitor passing through a world you used to belong to. Then came the day the company announced streamlining. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. An email went out at 8:30 a.m., calling for a mandatory all-hands meeting in the main conference room. You could smell the tension the moment you stepped off the elevator. The air felt thin. People were standing in small clusters, talking in hushed tones, checking their phones repeatedly. Everyone knew what was coming. The company had missed its third-quarter targets, and the rumors had been circulating for weeks. When the executive team walked in, they wore the standard expressions reserved for these moments. A carefully rehearsed blend of corporate regret and artificial optimism. They read from a script. Restructuring, navigating macroeconomic headwinds, positioning the organization for long-term agility. Then came the names. They didn't call them out in public. They sent private calendar invites for exit transition chats throughout the morning. You sat at your desk, watching the calendar notifications drop into people's inboxes. Across from you, a colleague who had been at the firm for 6 years suddenly stopped typing. Her hands hovered over her keyboard. She looked at her screen, then buried her face in her hands. Your inbox remained quiet. You weren't on the list this time. At noon, you walked past the glass-walled conference rooms. Inside, HR managers were handing out severance packets, explaining Cobra Health coverage, and offering outplacement assistance to people who looked completely shell-shocked. These were good people, hard-working people, people who had sacrificed weekends, answered emails at midnight, and bought into the promise that loyalty meant safety. You walked out to the parking lot for some air. The rain had stopped, leaving wet pavement that reflected the gray sky. You leaned against the side of your car, pulled out your phone, and checked your secondary bank account. The balance was sitting there, unshakable, indifferent to macroeconomic headwinds, indifferent to executive decisions, indifferent to HR scripts. In that moment, you felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for every morning you got up at 5:45 a.m., for every evening you spent staring at a screen while your friends were out at bars, for every time you felt the urge to brag about your success and chose to stay silent instead. The silence hadn't just protected your peace, it had preserved your focus. It had allowed you to build a lifeboat without anyone trying to poke holes in it or drag you back to the deck of a sinking ship. It is 5:45 a.m. again, 2 years since you started. You're sitting at the same kitchen table with the same mug of black coffee. The kettle clicks off in the background. On your laptop screen, the numbers have stopped feeling like an experiment. They feel like a new reality. The side business is no longer a side business. It's a quiet, self-sustaining machine that generates 3 times what your corporate salary pays you. Today is the day. You aren't going to make a scene. You aren't going to write a dramatic resignation letter or post a triumphant video online. You aren't going to tell your boss what you really think of his management style or lecture your coworkers on how to escape the rat race. You're going to walk into the office at 8:55 a.m., just like you always do. You'll sit at your desk, handle your morning tasks, and at 11 a.m., you'll request a 10-minute chat with your manager. You'll hand him a simple, printed letter, 2 sentences, expressing gratitude for the opportunity, giving a standard 2-week notice, and offering to make the transition as smooth as possible. When he asks you why, when he looks at you with genuine confusion and asks where you're going or what company offered you a better deal, you won't explain the business. You won't show him the revenue dashboards or talk about the system you built in the dark. You'll just smile softly, look him in the eye and say, "I'm just taking some time to focus on a few personal projects." He'll nod, assuming you're taking a break, or maybe looking for a new direction. He'll wish you luck. You'll shake his hand. And then you'll walk back to your desk, pack up your few personal belongings into a simple canvas bag, and log off for the very last time. Outside, the morning sun finally breaks through the blinds, painting a strip of golden light across your kitchen table. No one knows how much you have. No one knows what you built. And as you close your laptop and take a final sip of coffee, you realize that was the secret all along. The best kind of freedom isn't the kind you show the world. It's the kind only you know exists.
Real wealth doesn't always look like a bigger house, an expensive car, or a life that everyone can see. Sometimes it looks like waking up at 5:45 a.m. and knowing you don't have to anymore. It looks like having enough saved to walk away from a bad situation. It looks like being able to help someone you love without putting yourself in financial danger. And sometimes the greatest sign that you've made it isn't what you bought. It's the fact that you no longer need anyone else to know that you did. So if this story made you think differently about what financial freedom really looks like, hit like and subscribe for more stories about money, wealth, and the quiet decisions that change your life. And I'm curious, if you suddenly had enough money to never depend on a paycheck again, what would be the first thing you'd change about your life? Would you quit your job? Start your own business? Help your family? Or would you keep working, but finally knowing that you had the freedom to walk away? Let me know in the comments. And remember, you don't have to look rich to be free. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.